Hello everyone. My name is Sveta, and today I would like to share my story with you. Please subscribe to the channel Animal Passion and click the bell so you don't miss new videos. I am 23 years old, and I have already been engaged twice, but unfortunately, both times it didn't work out. I live in an ordinary family, dad, mom, and an older brother who has been married for a long time and lives very far away from us, somewhere in Belarus, in a small town called Lida. Honestly, my life was quite ordinary, without any upheavals or anything that could make you smile. But everything changed about 3 months ago. I suddenly felt terrible boredom and an unbearable desire to change something. I couldn't sit at home doing nothing anymore. One day at dinner, I gathered my courage and said to my dad, "Dad, I want to work." He looked at me in surprise, put down his fork, and asked, "Why do you need that, daughter? Am I not giving you something? Are you lacking anything?" He always said that. Honestly, I adored my dad. For me, he was a real fairy tale knight. I even envied my mom a little because she had the best dad in the world, so gentle and kind. He never left us in need. He was also incredibly romantic. I often noticed how he joked with my mom, always played her some pleasant music, and gave her gifts. Sometimes he even left me at home and took my mom out on their special dates, dinners at a restaurant, walks along the embankment, in our native Sumy. And so, listening to all these stories about marriage from friends and acquaintances, I always thought there wasn't another dad in the world like mine. He was unique. He had an amazing ability to surround everyone in need with care. He always listened to me attentively and said, "Tell me, daughter." We were real friends. Dad even set aside one day a week for mom so they could spend time together, go to the movies, or have dinner in a cozy cafe. Imagine, they have been married for more than 23 years, but from the outside, it seemed like they had just gotten engaged. There was so much understanding and love between them. I admit, I was terribly jealous of him even towards my mom. Every time my mom asked if I liked someone, or when someone proposed to me, and there were quite a few guys, I always refused. I told my mom I wanted to marry someone just like my dad, someone who had everything he had. Mom would just sigh and say, "Oh, my dear, you'll hardly find anyone like your dad." But her words only strengthened my attachment to him. With each passing year, I became more and more convinced that my dad was the ideal man I wanted by my side. And even though he barely had any free time, dividing it between me and mom, he always took care of himself, went to the gym, and ate healthy. That's why anyone who saw him would give him no more than 28 to 30 years, even though he was already over 50. Because of such a strong attachment and love for him, I sometimes dreamed that he came to me, or that I married someone exactly like him. Of course, all this went too far, and I started indulging in strange fantasies, imagining him as my husband and so on. These thoughts, of course, bothered me a lot, but they were just dreams and imagination. I was feeling terrible at the time, and Dad noticed. "What's wrong, daughter? You seem a bit down." "Tell me, what happened?" he asked. I replied, "Dad, honestly, I'm so bored. I want a change of scenery. Maybe you could take a vacation, and we could go somewhere for a couple of days, maybe to the sea?" He hugged me and said, "Dear, it's hard to take a vacation right now, but for you, I'll try to get a couple of days off, and we'll go to the sea, somewhere in Odessa, so you can relax and cheer up." And Dad, as always, did everything possible and impossible to make mom and me happy. It was very difficult for him to get time off because his job was very demanding. So we went to the Sea of Azov for 3 days and rented a 2-room suite. I had my own room, and they had theirs. In the evenings, after we all gathered together, my parents would go to bed, and I sometimes stayed up late. From their room, I heard the usual sounds of any married couple. I couldn't help but overhear, and I felt like I was starting to understand things I had only vaguely guessed before. And even though we all know that dreams and fantasies don't come at our will, that's exactly what happened to me. And then I was very angry at myself for these thoughts. Those 3 days flew by unnoticed. We had fun, swam in the sea, and enjoyed every minute. Dad's vacation ended very quickly, and we returned home. Days started flowing as usual again. Mom also worked, and I spent most of my time at home alone. At 22, of course, I often thought about different things, watched movies. My dad was one of those men who went to the gym, took photos, and then hung them on the walls. And then, after we returned from vacation, something unexpected happened. In my mom's family, somewhere near m0m, in a village, a distant relative passed away. Naturally, Mom had to go to the funeral. Unfortunately, Dad couldn't take another vacation. His job wouldn't allow it. Mom understood everything perfectly. She always respected his tight schedule, knowing how hard it was for him to take time off. She went alone to fulfill her duty. And Dad called the relatives, expressed his condolences by phone, and promised to come in person at the first opportunity. "I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that," sis _retry, so I stayed home alone with my dad. In the morning, he would leave for work and return in the evening. On those days when Mom wasn't home, Dad became a completely different person. He was like a little boy who had lost his mom, sad, a little lost. I tried to cheer him up. I joked, "Dad, do you love her so much?" And he looked at me with eyes full of tenderness and said, "I love her with a love that will never be repeated. I can't live without her. I can't breathe without her." He literally said, "Without her, I don't exist." All those words, full of romance and deep feelings, pierced me to the core. And, honestly, I really wanted him to say them to me. Of course, I knew it was wrong, even sinful. But at that moment, he seemed like the only real man in the world to me, as if no others existed. One evening, sitting in my room, I held a photo of Dad taken in the gym. You remember, he was in great shape, athletic build. I held his photo, and out of immense love and attachment to him, my thoughts began to wander in a very dangerous direction. I looked at his photo, and you can imagine what was going on in my head. I started fantasizing, and it was so pleasant that I completely lost touch with reality. I only came to my senses when I heard Dad open the door to my room. He stood in the doorway, as if struck by lightning, unable to say a word. I couldn't move or speak either. He approached, sat next to me, and quietly asked, "Sveta, what are you doing?" And then, as if possessed, I started talking to him as if he were my best friend. "I love you, Dad," I whispered. "I want to marry someone like you." And then a flood of words came out, which I didn't even realize. In those moments, the devil becomes stronger than anyone. I felt him tremble. I hugged him, and tears streamed from my eyes. He began to respond to me, especially considering that Mom had been gone for several days, and they had settled into a certain routine. He started touching me. I admit, I felt incredibly, as if he were eating some juicy fruit, and it was so nice to see his desire. I told him, "I love you. I envy you in relation to your mother. I envy you in relation to the whole world." And he was enchanted because I seemed, as it seemed to me, very attractive, and what was happening between us was so intoxicating, as if he were drinking nectar, repeating, "You're a spitting image of your mother." And he was so happy. It went on for hours, and throughout Mom's absence, it repeated again and again, sometimes several times a day. Of course, it was all wrong, sinful, but I didn't understand what was happening to me, what happened in that moment. In one moment, everything changed. Now all this terribly torments me, and Dad suffers too. He hasn't talked to me for a long time. Even Mom noticed and asked, "What happened? Why are you both so sad? I see you like this for the first time." Of course, I couldn't tell her anything. I tried to make peace with him. I said, "Dad, don't be angry." But he just can't look me in the eye. I don't know what to do now, how to restore our relationship. Mom returned after a week. Her arrival brought not only the usual bustle but also an invisible tension that hung between me and Dad. We both tried to act as usual, but every glance, every awkward silence gave away our secret. Mom, of course, noticed. Her sensitive maternal heart immediately sensed the change. "What's wrong with you, kids? Did you have a fight? You look so sad, as if something happened," she asked, looking at me and then at Dad. We both just shrugged, mumbling something incoherent about being tired. How could I tell her? It was impossible. Shame and guilt literally choked me. Dad avoided my gaze. He used to be so open, always ready to hug and joke. Now he became closed off and distant. We no longer had heart-to-heart conversations and shared laughter. His gaze, when it accidentally met mine, was full of pain and regret. My soul was torn apart. I tried to approach him, take his hand, but he immediately pulled away. "Dad, don't do this," I whispered once when we were alone in the kitchen. "I know it's wrong, but I don't regret it." He just shook his head, not letting me finish, and left the room. My nights were filled with nightmarish dreams. In them, I relived those moments again, but with a sense of overwhelming horror. During the day, I wandered around the house like a ghost, unable to find my place. I lost my appetite. Sleep became shallow and restless. I knew something was wrong with me, but I didn't know who to turn to for help. These forbidden feelings, which seemed so intoxicating in moments of closeness, now turned into a poison eating me from the inside. Strangely, in those days, I particularly remembered those conversations with Mom when I said I wanted to marry a man like my father. Back then, it seemed like such an innocent dream, a naive fantasy, but now it turned into something monstrous. I hated myself for these thoughts, for these actions, but at the same time couldn't forget the feeling of euphoria I experienced next to him. It was like a drug. At first, it gives pleasure, then destroys. One evening, when Mom went to visit a friend, I was sitting in the living room. Dad was watching TV. I approached him and sat next to him, at a distance. His profile seemed so familiar and alien at the same time. He was wearing his home t-shirt, clinging to his athletic torso, and old, comfortable sweatpants that I used to find so cozy, but now gave me mixed feelings. His hair, always neatly styled, was a bit tousled. I noticed a slight sheen of sweat on his forehead, as if he was nervous. He always smelled so good, fresh, a hint of expensive cologne, and something masculine that always attracted me. I gathered my courage and quietly said, "Dad, I feel really bad." He flinched and turned to me, but his gaze was empty, as if he was looking right through me. "I do too, Sveta," he replied barely audibly. I dared to move closer, almost touching his shoulder. "I miss our connection, Dad, because it used to be like before." His hand, resting on the armrest of the sofa, twitched slightly. I knew he was struggling with himself. The conflict between his fatherly duty and what had happened was tearing him apart just as much as it was tearing me. I looked at his hand, strong, with prominent veins, always seeming so reliable. I remembered how that hand used to stroke my hair when I was little, how it held my hand when we went for walks, and how it had touched me just recently. The dissonance between the past and the present was unbearable. I looked up at him. He stared into space, but I could see the tension in his jaw. I realized he was suffering too. I wanted to fix everything, but how? How could you turn back time? I took a risk. I don't want things to be like this between us. Please, let's talk. He took a deep breath, and I caught a faint scent of gum. He always chewed gum when he was nervous. "What can I say, Sveta?" His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken for a long time. We both know it was a mistake. A huge mistake. Period. His words hit me like a cold shower, but at the same time brought a strange relief. He admitted it. He wasn't pretending nothing had happened. But I can't forget it, I whispered. My eyes filled with tears. It's so confusing. I love you as a father. But it was that too. Suddenly he stood up sharply, interrupting me. Don't you dare. His voice was harsh, almost unrecognizable. Never speak of this again. Never. It didn't happen. Do you understand? It didn't happen. Period. He was almost shouting, and a frightened gleam appeared in his eyes. He couldn't take it. Our past, our present, our shattered reality, all of it crashed down on him with renewed force. His harshness, his refusal to talk about what happened, wounded me deeply, but at the same time gave me a strange understanding. He was suffering too. And maybe his suffering was even greater than mine, because he was the father. And he had betrayed not only his wife, but essentially destroyed something sacred between parent and child. I saw his pain, and it stirred even more mixed feelings in me. On one hand, I wanted him to be strong, to take responsibility. On the other, his vulnerability perversely attracted me even more. After that night, we started living like strangers under the same roof. Mom started asking more and more questions, but we both skillfully avoided answering. She began to get anxious and lose weight. I saw her trying to understand what was happening, but we only grew more distant from her. Each of us caught in our own web of guilt and silence. My days were filled with apathy. I tried to keep myself busy, read books, watch TV shows, but nothing brought me comfort. All my thoughts kept returning to him, to my father, to what had happened between us. I started paying more attention to the details of his appearance that I used to take for granted. His strong hands, so skilled with tools in the garage, or when he played the guitar, or when he simply picked up a cup of coffee. His neck would sometimes be covered with light stubble when he forgot to shave. His eyes, which always seemed so kind and understanding, were now full of anxiety. All these little things, previously unnoticed, now seemed special, as if every feature of his body bore the imprint of our forbidden touches. Sometimes, when he came home from work, I would deliberately linger in the hallway, just to breathe in his scent, a mix of masculine sweat, cologne, and something intangible of my own, which I had always associated with safety, but now evoked completely different feelings. I began to notice how he took off his jacket, unbuttoned the top button of his shirt, how his muscles tensed under the fabric when he reached for something. These observations became a kind of fetish for me, a secret game I played with myself. One evening, when Mom went away for a few days to her parents' place, they lived not far from Kiev, in a small village, and she often had to go there to help. We were left alone again. I felt the air in the house grow heavy, filled with unspoken tension. Dad was sitting in his study, working at the computer, while I paced around for a long time, not daring to enter. Finally, I gathered my courage, knocked softly, and went in. He looked up, his gaze tired. "Do you need something, Sveta?" he asked, turning away from the screen. I came closer, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. He was wearing his favorite home shirt made of thin, slightly see-through fabric and house pants. On his feet were comfortable slippers, a bit worn with time. His hair was slightly damp. He must have just taken a shower. In his vulnerability, he seemed even more attractive to me. "Dad, I can't take it anymore," I began, my voice trembling. "I can't pretend nothing happened. It's hard for me. It's hard for you too. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that, sis, _retry, point." He closed the laptop, leaned back in the chair, and looked at me. In his eyes, there was a mixture of despair and something else that I couldn't understand. Perhaps it was melancholy, a yearning for normalcy, because it was. Yes. What do you want me to do, Sveta? He asked. His voice was subdued. We can't turn back time. I approached even closer, almost intimately. I caught a faint scent of his cologne and something else, something that belonged only to him. I looked at his hands resting on the table, and involuntarily remembered their touch. I felt warm. I don't know, I whispered, but I can't just let this go. I keep thinking about it all the time. It feels like I can't live without it, without you. I lifted my gaze and met his eyes. Through them, I glimpsed something like horror, and then something completely different. What was happening between us in those days when Mom wasn't home? I felt my cheek blush. He noticed it too. An expression appeared on his face that I had seen back then, in those days. He slowly reached out and touched my cheek. His touch was light, almost weightless, but it sent shivers down my skin. I closed my eyes. Sveta, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I felt his fingers glide across my cheek, then my chin. And at that moment, I realized that he, too, couldn't resist this attraction. It was wrong, but it was stronger than us. His touch became a spark that reignited a long smoldering fire. I knew it was wrong, but at that moment, I didn't care. His fingers slid from my cheek to my lips, and I felt a slight tremor. He looked at me as he had never looked at anyone else. In his eyes, I saw a reflection of my own desire. It was the moment when all barriers collapsed. Dad, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I can't live without you. I don't want to hide it. He withdrew his hand, as if burned, and jumped up from the chair. His face contorted in a grimace of pain. He paced the room like a cornered animal. I watched him, feeling my heart constrict. What are you saying, Sveta? This is madness. You are my daughter, he whispered, clutching his head. His voice was filled with desperation. He walked to the window, turned away, and I saw the tension in his shoulders. I understood that he was struggling with himself, with his feelings, with his duty, but I couldn't back down. I felt that this was my only chance for truth, for some relief from the pain that was tearing me apart inside. I approached him, embraced him from behind, pressing my cheek against his broad back. Through the thin fabric of his shirt, I felt the warmth of his body. I know, Dad, I whispered, but I can't stop thinking about you. Everything changed after Mom left. I felt his body tense in my embrace. He didn't push me away, and that was the whole point. He slowly turned to me, and in his eyes, I saw tenderness mixed with suffering. He looked at my lips, then into my eyes. I knew he was about to give in. At that moment, I felt like the most desired person in the world. He reached out, and I threw myself into his arms. His lips touched mine. It was gentle, but at the same time, passionate, as if he was trying to make up for lost time. He stroked my hair, ran his fingers through it, then his hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer. I felt my body melt in his embrace. We kissed for a long time, and in that kiss, there was everything forbidden: passion, pain, despair, tenderness. I felt his breath, his heartbeat, which echoed in me. I knew we were treading a dangerous path, but I couldn't help myself. His touch was so desired, so familiar, as if I had been waiting for him all my life. He lifted me, and I wrapped my legs around his hips, hugging him tightly. He carried me in his arms, and I felt like the happiest and most miserable woman in the world. His lips trailed along my neck to my collarbones, and I let out a soft moan. He murmured something incoherent, something about how he missed her, how he couldn't forget. The room seemed to dissolve, leaving only the two of us, immersed in this whirlpool of forbidden feelings. His hands skillfully unbuttoned my shirt, and I felt the cool air on my skin. He lowered me onto the couch, never taking his eyes off me. His eyes burned with fire, and I saw not only passion in them but also a desperate plea for forgiveness. His hands roamed my body, exploring every curve, sending waves of shivers through me. I felt his breath steady, and it aroused me even more. I ran my fingers through his hair, pulling him closer, craving more of this closeness. Thoughts of my mother, of how wrong this was,